years on record, a trend which is likely to continue. And that means that we are not on track to meet agreed targets to keep global temperature increase well below 2 degrees Celsius or at 1.5. We're not on target. So it raises very important questions. What is our responsibility? How do we intervene, take responsibility, and hold each other accountable? Global methane emissions from human activities do not escape these predictions and have continued to increase. Something has to be done. You don't need me to tell you that, since you are industry experts, you are policymakers, you are leaders in your own right. But because this is such an urgent matter, we cannot overemphasize the fact that methane is a powerful greenhouse gas with a short-term climate impact over 80 times more important than carbon dioxide. That is a fact. This is over a 20-year horizon. And while the oil and gas industry is responsible for 1/3 of anthropogenic methane emissions, it is the sector that has been identified with the highest potential for reductions. So here we are. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to do something. I really want you to take advantage of this platform. This is a high-level dialogue in the run-up to the December Climate Ambition Summit. The United Nations Environment Programme, the European Commission, the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and the Environmental Defence Fund are putting this high-level dialogue together with specific outcomes in mind, with a specific purpose. And so my challenge to you is that this should not be another talk shop. That's what we call it in South Africa, when we get together and we talk and we remind ourselves of important policies, important targets, important goals, but later on, never set the framework to measure what we have achieved and to hold each other accountable. Let's use this opportunity because it is a golden opportunity. We want to highlight in the next hour and a couple of minutes how international coordinated efforts are needed to credibly address methane emissions from the oil and gas sector with the urgency that is required and the scale required by science. We want to discuss actions that are needed to ensure that as long as fossil fuels are part of the energy mix, their methane emissions are minimized globally. And we want to inspire, this is the most important one for me, the one closest to my heart as a journalist, as a social justice journalist. We want to inspire other companies and countries to take action to curb methane emissions through specific policies and regulations. Now, we know that incentivizing the use of natural gas with the lowest possible methane emissions intensity is a good incentive. We also know that this partnership, although it is voluntary, is an important stepping stone, but perhaps we ought to have a conversation around regulations as well. How do we set up the regulatory framework and ensure adherence? So in a nutshell, that's what brings us here this afternoon. We're going to hear from various speakers. We're also going to have a panel discussion, and I'll tell you more about my panelists in a few minutes. But for now, to get us started, it is a pleasure to welcome Ms. Kadri Simpson, who's the European Commissioner for Energy for the European Commission. Over to you.
Thank you, Reddy. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very glad to co-host this event with the United Nations Environment Programme. In the European Union, has made a strong, clear, and explicit commitment to fight climate change and become climate neutral by 2050. In September, we proposed that the EU will cut greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. That means a radical transformation of all sectors of our economy and taking action in many areas. And when you think of climate, carbon dioxide is what comes to mind first for many. But we are missing a big part of the picture. Methane is the second biggest greenhouse gas driver of climate change after CO2. When released directly into the atmosphere, methane is a highest potent greenhouse gas with more than 80 times the warming power of carbon dioxide. over a 20-year period. And so to tackle that challenge, in October, the European Commission presented a comprehensive EU methane strategy. This strategy is our way forward to reduce methane emissions and the negative impact. And the strategy covers human-made methane emissions from waste, agriculture, and energy, because right now they represent 95% of human-made methane emissions, and we plan to address them all. To reach our 55% ambition, we will need to reduce methane emissions by more than a third. Our objective is to cut EU emissions by about roughly 35 to 37% compared to 2005, and for that we need to work across all sectors. But it's in the energy sector that we can cut emissions fastest and cheapest, half of it at net zero cost. And that's why a cornerstone of our strategy is to promote and encourage an active role of industry and a partnership with public authorities in this area. The oil and gas methane partnership is the best example of this approach. I regard today's launch of OGMP 2.0 as the first key deliverable of our strategy. And there are two main reasons why it is so important at this moment in time. First, collaboration. Europe is the world's biggest energy importer. And so Europe must lead the way. But at the same time, it is clear that we cannot do this alone. 75% of the emissions related to the fossil fuel we use in Europe occur outside the EU. So global collaboration is key. With this reboot of the OGMP partnership, we will work with our international partners to address the methane emissions all along the supply chain. This is just the beginning, but we already have some impressive numbers. 62 companies have joined the partnership, representing 30% of the world's oil and gas production across 5 continents. And I want to thank each and every one of the 62 companies for committing to this partnership and for committing to measure, report, and reduce pollution from both operated and non-operated assets. Increasing the dialogue with these key producers one-to-one and in multilateral fora will be the basis for the partnership's aim, delivering a 45% reduction in the industry's methane emissions by 2025 and a 60 to 75 reduction by 2030. This initiative is also tackling one of the biggest challenges when it comes to methane. This is data. Today, the lack of data on methane is the greatest barrier to developing the targeted policies we need to effectively reduce methane emissions. And we therefore urgently need to find a way to improve monitoring and reporting. Knowing where we are is crucial for knowing where we need to go. And that knowledge comes from concrete data. We will make good use of the reporting framework devised by the OGMP, and we expect the data to be available in autumn 2021. So next year, when we will look into upgrading the EU regulatory framework, we will build on the OGMP standards to develop our rules on compulsory monitoring, verification, and reporting of all energy-related methane emissions. At the same time, we also need that data to be properly reconciled and verified. This is why we are supporting the creation of an international methane emissions observatory. And I want to thank the UNEP and Climate and Clean Air Coalition colleagues for the work done so far to set up this observatory. And I look forward also to the involvement of the International Energy Agency in this endeavor. And I'm personally committed to encourage more countries to support the observatory and contribute to its long-term funding. Our hope is that the observatory will bring together partners to identify where the gaps in our data are. One good example is satellite data. Here in the EU, we are a technical leader in satellite imagery and methane emission leak detection through our Copernicus program. So we will play to that strength. We are well positioned to collaborate with our international partners to improve the monitoring of global methane emissions. So satellite observations are a hugely important component of data verification and reconciliation of energy methane emissions. That means they will be crucial for the future work of observatory. And it will then directly provide or commission from service providers the precious data we need. In time, we hope to extend the scope of the observatory to cover coal, waste and agricultural activities as well. That will be done once reliable monitoring and reporting methodologies are established for those sectors. And with a robust database, the observatory will be able to develop a methane supply index at EU and international level to provide a transparent picture of emissions across the supply chain. Because it is only when we are armed with the right knowledge that we can push for real change. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can make this round of the oil and gas methane partnership a success, we will enable the oil and gas industries further reduce emissions over the next decade and contribute to a more sustainable production, transport also, and use of oil and gas. And we will do it in a way that is transparent for civil society and governments. I want to thank those involved from these industries. You are showing a sense of environmental responsibility and a willingness to change. Like all areas of life, trust and good communication make for a strong partnership. And today is about making a firm basis for both. So, thank you.
Important word, transparency, because accountability requires transparency. We know all over the world that there's growing public concern over leaks and sometimes intentional releases of gas, and we have to acknowledge that truth. We also have to acknowledge that perhaps our measures have not been sufficient enough, and if there's opportunity to scale them up, then this is the right moment to do so and set up those frameworks that you were talking about in the data collection, which is going to help us in our path. So we're really thankful for your comments this afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Inga Anderson, to give the opening remarks. Welcome.
Well, I have to apologize to all my colleagues because we actually had a press event just a few minutes ago, and for reasons that are only known to the IT gods, I could not get through. And I've been doing this for 9 months, and this has never happened before, but I do apologize to all assembled here. But I'm sure that Fred and the CEO from Total and others did a wonderful job, so my deep apologies. And let me just say, and it was such a pleasure to be hearing the Commissioner, because I think that at this point, what we are talking about today is absolutely critical. And I come with just 4 basic messages, really. I mean, the first is that, and we heard that just from Commissioner, reducing methane emissions from oil and gas sector is an opportunity that we cannot afford to let pass by, because right now we need every reduction we can get and grab as we phase out hydrocarbons, and therefore getting at methane right now, today, is critical. The action we know is more important than ever. We need to limit warming to 1.5, and it is on the brink of impossibility. Or put it the other way, with proactive action, it is on the brink of possibility, but that window is closing. We know that, and so we need to take these rapid, far-reaching, make these rapid, far-reaching changes, including these deep reductions that we need to see, and methane is just the right place to start. And so it is fantastic that we have this new standard, and we know that the oil and gas industry is one of the largest sources of anthropogenic methane emissions, so let us begin there. But the entire industry needs to act ambitiously, and we are therefore pleased that the OGMP and member companies have signed up, because we believe that with the launch of OGMP Mark II, we're really increasing company membership and ownership of this process. It is the gold standard, this new framework. It provides the highest assurance that methane emissions are reported robustly, transparently, with accuracy, and that's critical because it's data and the verification and the independence of that verification that will engender trust. My second point here is that precisely this, that new framework provides very accurate information on company methane performance, and that combined with other sources of data, this information will help inform strategic decisions on climate change mitigation. And so the fact that it is that gold standard matters. The fact that it is transparent, the fact that it is measurable and monitorable, each of these matters enormously. I will say in this point also that the OGMP has benefited enormously from that collaboration with the European Commission, and in particular with the Directorate General for Energy. So it's wonderful to have the EC inside of the OGMP steering group, and we really appreciate that strong leadership that we have seen, because action by the EU on methane has the potential to galvanize methane reductions around the world, which is obviously what we aim to do. And we're very excited to see the EC and other partners establishing the Methane Observatory, as we just heard, and we think that that lays for a very good grounding. So that's my third point here. That EU ambition can really help drive a global ambition. And I think that that's a critical takeaway point. And my last point is that to win the race on net zero emissions, we need everyone on board. We need ambitious action from the oil and gas sector, and we need net zero commitments from companies to continue. We've seen that they've doubled in the past year. That's good. We need to continue down that path. But we realize that today we are far from the emission reductions goals that we need to get to 1.5. So we will have at UNEP the upcoming emissions gap report, which will tell us that we are not on track at all. So by all means, we celebrate today, but that does not mean that we rest on our laurels. The oil and gas industry and governments of oil and gas producing nations must make transitions to net zero economy central part of their vision towards 2050. And methane obviously plays a critical role, as I said. We at UNEP, we are very committed to supporting that ambitious methane mitigation action. We applaud the companies and governments that are stepping into this partnership. And we are watching for actions that will turn these commitments into actual, real methane emissions reductions and longer-term actions on net zero. We're moving in the right direction, but we need to increase the speed. We have that window of opportunity, but that window is closing. So we need to urge all companies to come into the OGMP to announce their ambitions on methane reduction to ensure that we win that net zero emissions race. And if we do it together, we surely can make that difference. With that, let me stop here and hand it back over to you, Mr. Lavi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Inga Anderson. It's important to keep reminding ourselves that the window of opportunity is closing, and we do have a chance for some tangible interventions. And I'm so delighted that you mentioned that Europe may very well be a start, but the rest of the globe has to be taken along, because as somebody from the global south, my first thought was, great, high-level discussion, but isn't it a bit too Eurocentric? What about the rest of the world? The commitment must reach us in this part of the world. And I'm delighted that in our panel discussion later on, we are going to be joined by the Environmental Affairs Minister from Nigeria to show that the urgency is global and the impact, I don't need to tell you that, but it is true that the poorest countries are often at the receiving end of any adverse climate impact, and we see the results thereof. So this action is very critical to those of us who are in the global south. Let's move along with our program this afternoon. I would like to introduce you and welcome President of the Environmental Defense Fund, Fred Krupp. Over to you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm here to talk about methane as well, which is the fastest way to slow global warming and how everyone can help. So my name is Fred Krupp, and I am, as has been said, President of the Environmental Defense Fund. And it's a pleasure to be with you, especially today, for the launch of the new Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0. It's a comprehensive effort to reduce methane emissions, and one that we applaud. And reducing methane emissions is the fastest way to slow the rate of climate change that we're seeing right now. Now, as you probably know, methane is a highly potent greenhouse gas responsible for more than a quarter of today's global warming. Until recently, that wasn't well known. But for nearly a decade, Environmental Defense Fund has led extensive peer-reviewed research in oil and gas fields across North America, Europe, and China. This analysis has identified the oil and gas industry as a major source of methane pollution, laying a science-based foundation for action. Conversely, slashing methane pollution from the oil and gas sector is the fastest, most cost-effective opportunity we have to slow the rate of warming today, even as we continue to decarbonize our energy system as fast as possible. And that's why we at the Environmental Defense Fund believe that the overall goal must be to virtually eliminate methane pollution from oil and gas operations. Now, thanks to the 62 companies representing 30% of the world's oil and gas production, for committing to measure, report, and reduce pollution from their core operations and from their joint ventures as well. The new Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0 framework will be the basis for robust standards in Europe and beyond to ensure that the industry takes the practical actions that are needed. I couldn't agree more with what Inger Andersen just said, that the European Commission can drive methane reductions globally, especially by implementing the import standard for oil and gas produced outside Europe that the European Commission thankfully is considering right now. It's impossible to overstate the importance of honest, transparent data. Without that, there's no way to measure progress or to tell success from failure. OGMP 2.0 has the right ingredients: measurement, reporting, verification, and targets, along with global reach. The forthcoming International Methane Emissions Observatory from UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, with core funding from the European Commission, will improve the consistency and credibility of methane pollution data from OGMP companies. OGMP and the observatory arrive at the same time that satellites and other remote sensing tools are offering unprecedented visibility into both the sources and size of methane pollution. These include the European Space Agency's TROPOMI instrument, private ventures like GHGSat, and soon MethaneSat, which is being built by a subsidiary of the Environmental Defense Fund. MethaneSat will not only locate, but it will also quantify and account for all methane pollution at oil and gas basins around the world. Its transparent, publicly available data will show who is emitting how much, where, and which companies or countries are making progress. We expect our MethaneSat work to help cut methane pollution from the global oil and gas industry 45% by 2025, delivering the same 20-year benefit as closing a third of the world's coal-fired power plants. This will put industry on the path to a 75% reduction before 2030. We now have the tools to identify and eliminate fossil methane pollution virtually anywhere on Earth. All that is needed is the commitment to use them. That's why, to me, OGMP 2.0 is such a crucial, big step forward for the companies, for their investors, for regulators and officials, and for the public that wants to know whether this industry is rising to the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for those hard truths, Mr. Fred Krupp. And as you were speaking, I was reflecting on what it would take to achieve social and economic transformations. And your message today has emphasized the fact that if we are to achieve social and economic transformations, the responses of industry, of global leaders, of policymakers, the responses that have been deployed thus far may no longer be sufficient at this time. And that's why we're here today, to reaffirm our commitment to explore new ways. And I go back to the word that, my favorite word this afternoon, accountability. Who is holding industry and governments accountable? I'm delighted that this partnership has strong presence of civil society, because I think that can only amplify the voices of grassroots communities as well. Thank you so very much for your message. Thanks indeed. We move on now to our panel discussion. I'm glad to introduce you to our first panelist, His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, who's the Minister of Environment of Nigeria. It's great to have you here, especially because Nigeria, as we know, is the largest oil and gas producer in Africa. So, Your Excellency, my question is exactly this. We know that Nigeria has taken major steps to curb methane emissions from the oil and gas industry. Can you please just tell us very briefly what these measures are, and are they working? Your Excellency, Minister? Perhaps you could unmute yourself. I think you are muted, Minister. Is the Minister there?
I selected the option for the, can you hear me?
Yes, please start from the beginning. You were muted.
Okay. Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you very much. First of all, we conducted preliminary assessment of the current status, the amount of gas flared, locations, its value, its health and environment, and economic analysis of various gas flare utilization options for the country, and identified the following among others: 178 flared points, flaring 8 billion cubic meters of gas annually. 65% of gas flared locations are onshore, and 80% of the gas from the flared locations can be visibly utilized. About $3.5 billion worth of inward investment will be required to achieve commercialization of gas.
Okay, we seem to have a problem with the Minister. I wonder if all of you, am I the only one who can't hear him at the moment, or has his line just dropped. Okay, what we'll do is we'll go back to the Minister in just a few minutes. I think let's keep the conversation going, and he will join us when it is fine to do so. I'll come back to you, Your Excellency. Now I want to introduce you to Mr. Marcelino Oria Arburua, the Chief Executive Officer of Energas. For those of you who may not know, that Energas is Spain's leading natural gas infrastructure company, and he's the European TSO and Technical Manager of the Spanish gas system. Mr. Oreja, it's a pleasure to have you here. And again, same question from you. I do want to know, what is Energas doing to curb its methane emission? And added to that, how transparent are your systems? Are you able to measure adequately what your achievements are?
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you for organizing this conference. I'm really pleased to be here today. It's very important for us to contribute as much as we can to reduce methane emissions, and any gas emission is very important for us to be reduced. This is a very important initiative, and we will support it as much as we can. My team is working hard with all of you, and we'll be there as much as we are needed. So methane emissions, I think that the Minister is coming in again.
Okay, well, Minister, if you're listening to us, we'll come back to you in the next round of questions. Let's just allow Mr. Marcelino to carry on, because you started already. Please carry on, sir.
Okay, so methane emissions management and the reduction of methane emissions is part of our culture now. It's part of our corporate culture and part of our blood, I would say, at all levels in the company. And we have committed to reduce our carbon emissions. We will become neutral in 2050, in line with the objectives of the European Union. And to achieve this, we are going gradually to reduce our gas emissions. So by 2030 and 2040, we will reduce in 2030 by 25%, and in 2040 by 61% of our emissions. It's important to highlight that since 2014, we have reduced our our GHG emissions by 50%. So we will continue to reduce as much as we can. You were asking me, is this measurable? So we, of course, that's a big problem, and that's what we have to all work together in order to measure methane emissions. And we will be partner with anyone that will help or want to help in reduce methane emissions and to measure them. The Commissioner was speaking about some satellite technology. We will be there also, and we are even studying some satellite technology to try to reduce and to measure methane emissions. Our strategy to manage and mitigate methane emissions is based in three different pillars. So one is try to find the best available techniques and energy efficiency measures in our infrastructures. We are working very hard on R&D efforts, trying to look for new technologies to reduce and measure those methane emissions. And we have to work together, all the industry. There are new technologies, new ways to measure methane emissions and to reduce them. Only everything that's measured can be reduced. So measurement is going to be very important in the future, and involvement in development of new technologies to detect and quantify methane emissions. So we are working on different areas. We have linked the variable remuneration of our professionals, of everyone in the company, to the compliance of these targets. So every executive in the company has its bonus linked to reduction of emissions in the company. We are minimizing venting and flaring in our company. We work, of course, and we collaborate with Sustainable Gas Institute. That's important for us also. And we are involved in projects at the European level related to monitoring, reporting, and verifying methane emissions. So there are many projects we are working on. Some of them, like working with Queen Mary University of London, in order to measure these methane emissions in the energy chain. We are aware aware that in our business, and we are the midstream activity, measuring and reducing methane emissions is part of our future, and we are linked to that. If we're not able to reduce methane emissions in our part of the chain, we won't be sustainable ourselves as an industry, and that's I think it's important for us. So thank you very much for having us here, and happy to listen to other of the intervenants this afternoon, and have some other questions later on.
Sure, there will be some more questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Oreja. And right now, I'd like to introduce all of you to Mr. Paolo Gallo, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Italgas. Now, this is an Italian company that specializes in the distribution of natural gas. And again, it claims to integrate strong principles of sustainability in its business model. And we know that it's a member of the UN Global Compact. So let's find out what that looks like. I look forward to hearing from you, sir, what Italgas plans to do to curb its methane emissions.
Thank you to everybody, and thank for the opportunity to present my views, my company plans in front of such distinguished audience. Let me start by saying that the curbing methane emission in the gas distribution system is a very challenging task. In addition, grid extension and its variety, as well as the number of DSO, is making the task even more difficult. But having said that, we are well aware that the reduction of methane emission, as was said by my previous speaker, is essential to achieve European objective. And we think we can address them leveraging innovative technologies. First of all, grid digitization. The example that I brought is the company Italgas. Italgas is investing more than €1 billion to transform all the equipment that is sitting on the gas network into digital one, to make our network fully digitized, be able in that way to collect billions of data to completely understand and forecast the behavior of our network. Once the network is fully digitized, then hardware-enabled software and analytic solution for measuring and locating natural gas leaks will allow gas DSO to measure, report, and eliminate the leakages. Measurement of the gas leakages can be performed now with great accuracy, at speed and at scale. And in fact, one of the major areas to measure are what we call super emitters, which account only for 5% in terms of number of sources, but they account for more than 60% of the total emission in the gas distribution system. We started using these innovative technologies about 2 years ago, and now we have already gained a significant experience to exploit their full potential. It was said before that we need to collect reliable and accurate data in order to report the actual emission rates for individual leaks, as well as to aggregate emissions over individual pipelines, as well as the entire utility network, moving from what we called or is so-called inventory method to actual measurement. One other element to reduce methane emission is the use of renewable gases such as biomethane, because the feedstock used for its production, which spontaneously releases a significant amount of methane, will instead be used for producing renewable energy with a neutral carbon footprint. So our grid should be ready to accept biomethane, a way to reduce the methane emission. On this pillar, we have already announced Italgas strategy and the commitment inside the strategy for reducing the methane emission related to our activity in line with the EU objective, with an objective in a short period of time, so in the next 5 years, to reduce our methane emission more than 20%. That is the way, that is the context in which I will pose our goal to reduce our methane emission.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so very much. We'll come back to you in the next round of questions. But right now, thank you, Mr. Gallo. Thanks indeed. Let's welcome Mr. Gordon Birrell, who's the Executive Vice President of Production and Operations at BP. Now, BP has pledged to become a net zero company by 2050. This is a very ambitious target, I'm told, because it's as good as it gets for an oil and gas company. But I wonder whether there's more that can be done. But just tell us, what exactly does this mean, and how do methane emissions fit into this framework?
Excellency, Reddy, ladies and gentlemen, hello everyone. It's my real pleasure to be part of this distinguished panel and this distinguished debate. Back in February, BP set out a really ambitious goal, which is to be net zero as a company by 2050 or sooner. And we did that because we see our customers, our stakeholders demanding not just cleaner, affordable energy, but demanding different types of energy, not just oil and gas, but solar, wind, eventually hydrogen, probably. So there's a real change in the world in terms of the types of energies that our customers are demanding and are going to demand. So therefore, we announced a pivot from being what is known as an international oil company to be an an integrated energy company. And what this means over time is that we will invest less in oil and gas and more into other forms of energy, such as solar and wind and potentially hydrogen, perhaps a bit later. So a real pivot for our company. To underpin that pivot, that strategy of net zero by 2050, we announced 10 specific aims, very specific with targets, some of the targets 2025, some of the targets 2030, but very specific targets. Let me just talk about two of them, or maybe three of them, and then I will get specifically to the aim around methane. One of our targets is to be net zero in our production facilities. We produce oil and gas all over the world, and our aim is to be net zero by 2050 from our production facilities. And of course, we've set interim targets much nearer term than 2050. We've also committed to be net zero in terms of all the oil and gas we produce. So in other words, all the oil and gas we produce, when it's combusted, all the CO2 that's produced, we've committed to be net zero by 2050, which is, we think, the right thing to do, but also a very ambitious thing to do. But very aligned with the demands of our investors, our employees, and our customers. Let me now come specifically to methane, which is what internally we call our aim 4. And we have, for a number of years, been investing heavily in the measurement of methane emissions. We felt the factors that were used to determine emissions were perhaps had large ranges of uncertainty, and measurement was a much better way to do that. So we've invested in that, and we've now committed specifically to have a methane intensity from the gas that we produce by 2025 of 0.2%. 0.2%. That's a very specific target. And then once we've got to that 0.2 by 2025, we will then halve that intensity over some period of time yet to be determined. So we've set out very specific and measurable targets for methane emissions from our company. And the measurement will be achieved by a number of things, from satellites, as has already been mentioned by people, by drones with detection on them. This summer, we flew a drone from the Shetland Islands in the north of Scotland to a large production facility in the Atlantic margin west of Shetland, 180 kilometres. It flew remotely, autonomously, circled the platform, the production facility, a number of times, measuring methane emissions from that facility, then flew back to the shore again. That's just an example of one type of technology. We're also installing fixed methane detection on many of our facilities around the world. So overall, we feel we have an ambitious net zero ambition. It's underpinned by specific targets, and specifically on methane, we've laid out some very specific and ambitious goals that we're investing into right now. Back to you, Reddy.
Thank you so very much. And it is heartening to hear that your investors are also putting pressure and are holding you accountable, because often when it comes to climate justice, it is the activists that feel as if they're knocking their head against the wall and nobody's listening. So if investors are also part of this urgency, then we will get somewhere. Thank you so very much, Mr. Birrell. Let's just go back to His Excellency. I believe that we have sorted out the technology gremlins and problems. Your Excellency, if you are back, I'm delighted to ask you my next question. I do want to find out, I mean, we're launching OGMP 2.0 today, but it will have no meaning unless you see the support for your own country. So your aspirations, how do you hope the OGMP will support your country in your efforts to curb methane emissions? And what are some of the key challenges that you can tell us about? Your Excellency? If the Minister can unmute, you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, earlier on I had power failure, regrettably to tell you that. Well, awareness is the key to understanding and saving certain problems with future manifested impacts such as methane emissions. As you are aware, the world and Nigeria have been emitting methane amongst other forms of greenhouse gases for over 50 years, but harsh effects manifested not more than 2 decades ago. Thus, voluntary initiatives to help countries and companies reduce methane emissions such as the OGMP will play a key role in enhancing the progress and milestone through high-level awareness of dangers and benefits to aversion, as well as redirection of political will, provision and sharing of information regarding advancement methodologies and achievement by other companies and countries for other members such as Nigeria to replicate. With regard to needed support or incentives to further our mitigation efforts, it is first pertinent to note that both in Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Environment and Petroleum Resources have established agencies that are geared towards the beneficial institutional agendas such as reducing methane and other greenhouse gas emissions. Most of these agencies, especially those in the petroleum industries, have available funds but lack the technology and the development strategy. Some, especially those in the Ministry of Environment, have the required mandate but lack the financial resources to provide enforcement. Thus, a combination of technology, strategy, and access to financial resources is needed to enhance the present effort by Nigeria to require level in the shortest possible time framework, and which we believe can do better to achieve by the establishment of a coordination and reporting project office in partnership with international community. Particularly, the OGMP hosts to house, guide, and support the two ministries in working simultaneously towards the required goals. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. I want to go back to you, Mr. Gordon Birrell. I mean, from an industry perspective, and as a representative of upstream companies members of the OGMP today, what needs to happen to make this partnership effective, to give it value? In other words, what is still missing? I mean, we're hearing over and over that reducing methane emissions is rapidly becoming a condition for societal license in other areas. But how can we move from this being public relations, from a voluntary process only, and strengthening this so that more and more people are held accountable and they become part of this journey? And in other words, I mean, is it enough to have a voluntary partnership? Isn't there space for better regulations? Isn't that a better alternative?
Thank you for the question, Reddy. I think there's a couple of areas that I think this initiative is essential for. One is collaboration. The more we can collaborate as an industry, both the upstream part of the industry and the midstream part of the industry, the more we will achieve. We've got remarkable resources that when we collaborate and we bring together, we can develop technology, we can develop new measurement techniques, we can reduce the cost of these measurement techniques together through standardization and through common approaches. So I think, first of all, collaboration. Then I think we just collectively need to continue to set the bar high for ourselves. We are companies who are led by, and indeed many of our employees like to achieve targets. So continually raise the bar. So I wouldn't say there's anything specifically missing. I think we just got to keep amping up our ambition year after year, deploying the technology, developing the technology, and making sure that we meet the needs of our investors. So I wouldn't say there's a massive gap. It's about us collectively and individually continuing to raise the bar on the expectations of ourselves. Back to you, Redi.
Thank you. And Mr. Marcelino, again, the same question, why did you join the OGMP, and can we hope that more companies will join this effort globally, and what needs to happen to make that possible? Mr. Oreja? Okay, we'll try one more time.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Marcelino, can you hear us? Yes, yeah. You did get the question.
Sorry, I didn't turn off the mute. So as Gordon was saying, working together, the midstream, downstream, and upstream companies is very important to achieve our goals. So I'm somehow representing the midstream companies here, and I'm very happy to do so. And I think all the industry, at least in Europe, we're pushing very hard to measure methane emissions and to work to reduce them as much as we can. Many of the European gas operators, we have been working successfully already these last years, and we are offering our expertise and our experience. So technology is going to be very important. If we achieve to work together, we will be able to measure cheaper than we've done it. It was, as Gordon was saying. So I'm sure that your OGMP will contribute to improve the transparency and accuracy of methane emissions data. We have to reach higher levels in at least 3 years, and this is challenging, but is achievable, I think. So we have to measure as much as we can to reach these levels, and work all of us together. Members of OGMP will set ambitious reduction targets to define and decarbonize path. The decarbonization path is very important, and we will work to mitigate any effect we have in our industry, as I was saying, and Mr. Gallo also. We all think that this is a part of our future, and we are really committed. I really think that decarbonization is going to come from the industry itself, and we are working very hard, the whole industry, oil and gas industry, to reduce emissions, whether that be CO2 or methane emissions. I'm sure that the OGMP will contribute to establish a platform for the industry, and we will, as you were saying in your first words, we will ensure homogeneity and the exchange of knowledge between ourselves and looking for the best practices. We're working very hard that the European associations, as Marco Gas and ENSOC and other European associations work together and bring with us every other midstream company in order to have them together working to achieve all these goals. That's why it's important for us to be here today, and we will support this initiative as much as we can.
I like what you said there, that bringing other midstream companies, and that takes us nicely to you then, Mr. Gallo. If you were to recruit other companies, downstream companies, to be part of this urgent partnership, OGMP 2.0, what would you say to them? What would you say are the benefits? What is the story that you would take to them about why this is important now?
Well, there are, like you said, joining the OGMP 2.0 is bringing a lot of benefit, not only to Italgas, because we join OGMP 2.0, but also to any other peers that may join. So we will, by sure, advertise to join this important association. Why? Let me try to tell you from our perspective which are the benefits that we see in being part of this association. First of all, from our perspective, having already reached a very high technological level in controlling and reducing methane emission, I think we can play a leading role in this initiative. Second, we have heard Commissioner Simpson today saying that there will be a new methane emission strategy soon in 2021. And we understood that the gas industry will be asked to join a framework, and this framework will probably be consistent with this initiative. So again, being part of this initiative means that you are able to work on the framework that the Commission will establish for the methane emission. And then work that we are currently undergoing in technical association at the European level, such as GERG, Groupe Européen de Recherche Gazier, for example, as an example, will be rationalized within OGMP 2.0. Some of my colleagues have already talked about the collaborate with our peers on specific issue will offer to everybody an incredible value in terms of benchmark, in terms of inspiration to find the most suitable technical solution to control and reduce methane emission. For us, for Italgas, being part of this association will provide to us additional fuel for our sustainability journey. Sustainability is already core of our strategic plan, is in the center of our strategic plan. We have been recently confirmed for the second consecutive year in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, but I think that OGMP 2.0 will bring us more fuel, more push to move forward quickly than before. At the end of the day, what counts most for us is being able to state in front of our final customer and all the institutions that we are able to manage an essential public service like the gas distribution is in the most sustainable way. And that being part of the OGMP 2.0 will help us a lot in that, with that goal.
Mm-hmm. I'm just reflecting here, and this is the theme for the last round of questions, economic recovery in a post-pandemic world. And I'll start with you, Minister, that, you know, all of us are facing this, and the anxiety is that as we deal with the ongoing economic crisis, then it is so easy for governments and policy makers to perhaps not act with urgency on climate change and prioritize economic development. And the message that you want to send is that these two are related. One cannot happen without the other. We cannot privilege one thing over the other. Climate cannot be pushed on the back burner because most of our economies are struggling because of the pandemic. I almost want a commitment from everybody that in our journey of, irrespective journeys of economic recovery, the climate will not be forgotten, that it will be central to the recovery. So let me start with you then, Minister. Is it possible, and what are you going to do as Nigeria to ensure that climate change is prioritized even as economic recovery begins after the pandemic? And related to that question, Minister, is what role does the oil and gas industry have then in Nigeria in this dual process? If you can unmute yourself, Minister. Your Excellency, please unmute. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, yeah, good. Well, it is not going to be easy, but I strongly believe that it is achievable as we have embarked on the process to achieve it using a multifaceted approach. From the Federal Ministry of Environment, we have the Sovereign Green Bond, which is used to finance climate resilient projects by ministries of emission sectors or with mitigation capabilities. In this course, the bond serves as an impact bond where proceeds are gotten not necessarily or directly in currency, but also level of socio-economic development and can result to taxable SMEs, poverty alleviation, government-delivered service, ability such as renewable power supply, as well as an alternative and climate action achievements such as enhance afforestation. From the central government angle, we have introduced a 2.3 trillion, that is $6 million stimulus package as part of the post-COVID economic sustainability plan. The government is also committing 240 billion naira, which is $63 million in the clean energy sector to provide solar power to 5 million households currently not connected to the national grid and create 250,000 jobs. And also 90 billion, which is equivalent to 236 million for a financial program to promote domestic use of compressed natural gas, and also 23.4 billion naira, which is $61.4 million to convert 30 million homes from dirty fuels, which is kerosene, charcoal, and diesel, to liquefied petroleum gas, as well as applying more LPG in agriculture, power generation, transport, and industry. The conversion to LPG will enhance our climate action by reducing black carbon emissions from the burning of fossil fuels and support the creation of 1 million jobs. Pre-COVID-19, oil gas was close to 90% of the country's export, but the pandemic has depressed the demand for crude oil and precipitated an unprecedented oil price crash. Nigeria's dependence on oil for revenue and foreign exchange makes it particularly vulnerable in this situation. The recovery plan of Nigeria recognizes the need to undertake growth-enhancing and job-creating infrastructure investment in renewable energy. While we get there, we believe improving the environmental performance of oil and gas sector now is equally important towards driving maximum economic benefit while reducing environmental risk and address emission rise. However, international expertise towards coordinating implementation and facilitating access to technological and financial resources is pivotal for us to achieve this aim. Finally, it is pertinent to note that Nigeria's unique and strategic standpoint in the African continent naturally positions it to serve as a mirror reflection for all the African countries to see its methane reduction activities replicate, particularly the oil and gas production countries. Thank you.
We'll be watching the rest of us in Africa to see that Nigeria does stick to its commitment. And I think just emphasizing what you said earlier about the need for expertise, and this partnership, when implemented well, can open up our world in a magnificent way, and the sharing of expertise and know-how is quite urgent. Thank you very much, Minister. Now, Mr. Gallo, just back to you. From your perspective, how do you foresee that the role of gas and its very capillary distribution networks will develop in the next decade? I mean, what role should companies such as Italgas play in the race to zero?
Well, first of all, I'm truly convinced that the gas distribution network, as well as the gas infrastructure system in general, will play a significant role for the European energy supply, even in its own term, becoming the real backbone of the future European energy integration. Let me explain you why. There is a growing need for flexibility and storage capacity in the energy system due to the increased role of renewable sources. The gas system already offers these services at a very cost-effective level. In the near future, new technologies such as power to gas will be the answer at competitive cost to the need of flexibility and energy storage. In addition to that, you have to consider the biomethane. And in this vision, gas grids will play a key role in connecting a growing number of local biomethane production plants. But to make this scenario possible, gas DSO need to prepare their network to receive different blends of natural gas, biomethane, and hydrogen. In this perspective, full digitization is essential in order to control in real time the gas grid content, ensure the quality of the gas delivered to the final customer, and more important than everything, control and reduce methane emission. For that reason, gas DSO shall invest and should be allowed to invest by National Regulation Authority in innovation, such as digital transformation, or pilot project to test power-to-gas technologies with the aim to accelerate and scaling up the most promising one in order to improve the competitiveness of green hydrogen with other energy vectors. In Italgas, but I'm quite sure is an attitude common in the downstream sector, we are not only aware of what is necessary, but we have already launched a number of projects whose result will make us ready to challenge the future of a fully decarbonized energy system, what you call the race to zero by 2050. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. A related question to you, Mr. Abrua. What is the role of midstream companies in a world that is decarbonizing? You've all mentioned that in various ways this afternoon. So what is, and I guess, building back better in your countries of operation? Mr. Abrua, if you can unmute yourself.
Sorry again, sorry.
Yes,
sorry.
no problem.
Sorry for this. So we, as midstream companies, we are also working in new technologies in order to reduce methane emissions, as we were saying, and of course, allowing renewable gases to be used in our infrastructure is going to be very important, as Mr. Gallo was saying. So introducing biogas, biomethane, hydrogen in our network is going to be very important to decarbonize the gas that we're today transporting. So it's not only about electrifying the economy, it's also about decarbonizing it. We really think that doing this with renewable gases is cheaper and more cost effective than going through electrification. Actually, not everything can be electrified. We are working very closely with different companies in Spain, developing different projects around producing hydrogen to be injected in our network. Actually, we are developing a project with Acciona, with another Spanish company, and the European Commission has selected the project coordinated by us. It's called Green Island in the Balearic Islands. It's going to be one of the first projects to produce hydrogen injected in the network in Baleares, in Mallorca. All invited to come to Mallorca and see it. I hope we will be ready in 1 year from now. So we are negotiating a grant agreement with the European Commission, and we will receive, we hope, 10 million euros to contribute to this very important project. It will position Spain as an important hydrogen hub. It's the first of many coming. This hydrogen is going to can be blended in our network, can be produced as pure hydrogen. So here, together with other DSOs, in this case, we are working with the local DSO in Mallorca to inject and produce the hydrogen injected in the DSO system and use it as a final use for transportation in Palma and Mallorca. So the future of midstream assets, I think that the renewable gas is going to be very important, and this can fit in our strategy of decarbonizing the world using this renewable electricity. So in other, and just to finish, in some places, just to substitute other fuels with LNG is also going to be important in the decarbonized world. Today, LNG is the only real sustainable alternative for many other transportation activities as a maritime fuel, and we're also working very hard. We've started up a small-scale company. We're investing in barges and other assets in order to be able to make it simple to produce, to sell LNG to many maritime companies. So this is going to be also very important. Thank you very much, Lady.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Abrua. my last question, because we will be wrapping up our gathering in about 10-15 minutes, but Mr. Dirrell, I do want to find out from you, how can oil and gas producing companies contribute to the path to net zero emissions? And that first question that I asked earlier, the recovery phase of the current economic crisis. I mean, how can a company like BP be an agent for change, and most importantly, rally additional commitments, because we need them, rally additional commitments, be a role model, in other words, for those industry players still sitting on the fence of climate change?
Thank you, Reddy. I think the oil and gas industry has a huge role to play in both the energy transition towards net zero and the economic recovery in the world. One of our primary responsibilities, I feel, is keeping the energy market supplied. There's going to be a demand for oil and gas for many, many years to come. And keeping these oil and gas energy demands satisfied so that the markets of the world stay stable is one of the roles. But of course, it has to be done with cleaner and more affordable energy as we go through the transition. So that's the first thing I would say is the role of the oil and gas industry is to keep demand satisfied with cleaner, more affordable energy over time. Then, I wouldn't try to influence other companies. Every company needs to choose its own path. But many companies have a path that takes them to lower emissions and like BP, some to net zero. And I think our responsibility through the recovery phase in the world is to continue on that path towards whatever objectives have been set on the way to net zero. The industry has absolutely enormous amounts of skills. We've got engineering skills, commercial skills, project management skills, carbon capture and storage skills, hydrogen skills. We've got all the skills to continue to supply the markets of the world whilst also continuing to grow renewable energy over time. So I think that the contribution from oil and gas is going to be massive over the next couple of years, both to the energy transition and recovery of the world. Thank you, Reddy.
Thank you so very much. We've come to the end of our discussion. I think that some pertinent commitments came up, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future and looking back and seeing that what came out of our mouths this afternoon was not just words, but words followed by action. And I emphasize once again that it seems we are all in agreement from your different contributions that oil and gas is the sector with the highest potential for reductions. And I am hoping that through your actions, your counterparts in other parts of the world, especially in the United States, will sign up and be part of this process. Our ability to meet the Paris Agreement and avoid exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming depends on your industry, on the global oil and gas industry's willingness to reduce methane emissions. So let me thank you all for participating in our panel discussion. His Excellency Minister Mohammed Mahmoud Abubakar, thank you for your time. The Minister of Environment for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We also thank you, Mr. Marcelino Argulua, Chief Executive Officer of Energas, Mr. Paulo Gallo, Chief Executive Officer of Italgas, and of course, Mr. Gordon Dirrell, who is Executive Vice President of Production and Operations for BP. Thank you so very much for your commitment and for your presence here this afternoon. So before we wrap up, I do want to draw your attention to these various messages from the oil and gas industry. We recorded these messages for you. Take a look. Thank you so very much. Thank you. And we see all the sponsors there and all the speakers there and the commitments being made by industry. We've come to the end of our gathering. Again, let me thank you for allowing me to moderate. But before we go, let's hear from Mr. Nigel Topping, who's the UK High-Level Climate Action Champion, COP26, to give us the concluding remarks this afternoon. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Reddy, and thank you for all the partners who've collaborated together to produce this oil and gas methane partnership. And congratulations to all 62, I think I heard right, oil and gas companies who've joined in making their commitments to reduce this important and element of the race to zero, to the zero carbon economy. As we've heard and as we know, methane's the second biggest contributor. And I think that the figures there speak for themselves. Also, one of the areas with known solutions, right? So no reason to not tackle this very quickly. So I'm really encouraged by the industry action. And I really agree with Gordon's summary of the unique skill set that the oil and gas industry has that we're going to need to draw on to make this huge transition across so many sectors. You know, the deep balance sheets, the huge project engineering skills, the understanding of operating heavy engineering in hostile environments, you know, geopolitical risk management. If you want somebody to build massive floating offshore wind plants around the world, you need to go to somebody with the attributes of the oil and gas industry to find a way to do that, something that somebody can start up in a garage. Right, so it's really encouraging to see more and more of the companies not just committing to oil and gas methane partnership, but also committing to getting to net zero by 2050, because we know that's what we've got to do. And I always say, anyone who's ever been on an audit and risk committees, just think about 1.5 degree as a single risk that you're looking at on the likelihood and impact dimensions that we always look at in audit and risk committees. And the likelihood's been going up every time the IPCC have reviewed it, but the impact has as well. And we know that next year, when the IPCC start doing their first reports in the sixth assessment, they'll once again be saying, we got it wrong. Actually, the impact of 1.5 degrees is worse than we thought it was last time. That's why you know, Gonzalo Munoz and I launched the Race to Zero, because we think this is an inevitable transition, and the pressure from science, from citizens and from policymakers and from investors is only going to go up. But the good news, the technology is going up exponentially as well. So we've been really pleased with the response to the Race to Zero campaign. We're looking forward to seeing the first oil and gas companies join the Race to Zero campaign when the science-based targets methodology is finalized early in the new year. And I'd just like to end by encouraging everybody to look very seriously at those. Let's get a big chunk of oil and gas companies into the Race to Zero before we get to Glasgow. And once again, thank you for all the partners for putting together Oil and Gas Methane Partnership 2.0 and for the significant contributions to tackling climate change that the actions that those 62 companies are now going to take will mean. Thank you very much, Reddy.
Okay, and thank you so very much for your message, for your words. I wish you well, as you know, you've got your work cut out for you. These are not easy targets, but they are urgent. The consequences of not acting are even more dire. So good luck, all of you. And to the activists, and obviously I'm biased because I'm a journalist, my heart gravitates more towards civil society and activists. Let's continue sharpening our gaze on industry, governments, and policymakers to make sure that climate justice becomes a reality in our lifetime. Thank you all so very much, all the partners who made today possible. Take good care. Bye-bye.